Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. I am your host, Eric Worrell of rentprep.com, and I'm at the actual office today. Sometimes I usually do these from home. Andrew can't see. I put on a bandana today,
Oh, did you?
but Andrew's having trouble seeing my screen. Yeah, I know. I thought you'd be
I can
able to
see, I
see
can
me.
stare at myself. I can stare longingly at myself this entire episode, but I cannot see you.
Yeah, well, that's all right. We'll still get through it.
Yeah.
So, for anybody who doesn't know, Andrew Schultz, associate broker, which is a property manager in New York State. Manages 125 doors in the Western New York area. Did I miss anything?
That sounds about right.
Okay, cool. Well, we've got 4 questions this week that we're going to go through. Why don't we start with one that came from Rohan? So I saw that you actually kind of gave him some good advice already in the Facebook group on this one. But Rohan said that he has 2 qualified applicants. One wants to move in this weekend, the other wants to move in mid next month. How do I word the letter to the tenant too while following fair housing law? So he's like, how do I deny this tenant who wants to move in later?
Sure. So I guess I'll start by saying I'm not an attorney. Speak to yours if you really want good answers on something like this. Fair housing law is very, very in depth. There's a lot of different nuances to fair housing law, but I don't see a fair housing law violation here.
Yep.
Realistically, you just happen to have two people that applied and for the same apartment at the same time, and they're both qualified. So you just have to pick one. I don't see a fair housing issue here. I would just tell the second applicant that unfortunately you're going with a different applicant, and if you pulled a credit and background check, you do have to issue them an adverse action letter, just letting them know that a credit and background check was pulled and that that was used as part of the determining criteria for their tenancy or for their application rather, since they're not getting the actual apartment. As long as they send an adverse action letter, I think they're covered, realistically speaking. I would just send a generic one, says that unfortunately we're going in with a different applicant. Give the contact info, and I think he was a rent prep customer as well. I think he got his credit and background checks through you guys.
Yep.
So I'd let him know that you might have the rent prep specific one that you can send over to him as well.
Yeah, you actually just emailed him that over. You want to make sure that your screening company's information is the contact information on that adverse action letter. We have a generic one in the group because we know that there's people in the group who don't use Rent Prep for their background checks, and we don't want to get those calls because we can't service them.
Right.
But yeah, just make sure that you have the screening company's information on that. And yeah, like Andrew was saying, make it generic. Don't give them specific reasons. Don't go into it. Less is more when you're denying somebody. It's already not a fun thing to deal with for them. So don't, go into the specifics of why they were denied. Like the screening agency, the consumer reporting agency, which is what Rent Prep is, deal with that. And
Exactly.
you know what? We actually dealing with one this morning. Our screener was working back and forth with a renter who was upset that they did not get a rental property because of information they thought that was erroneous on their credit report. So that is stuff that
Really.
we handle. Sometimes, sometimes they actually have a legitimate gripe. In this particular case, it was an individual with a very common name, like something Smith.
Hmm.
And the data bases that reports are pulled from can get crossed, and that information, whether they go through Rent Prep or any other CRA, it's going to show that wrong information. So having an adverse action letter gets that awkward conversation or them pestering you gets that
Yeah.
conversation to come to the CRA
Shifts it
before.
over to the CRA. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Were they ultimately correct with the erroneous information or no?
Yes, I believe so. It was due to their name being so similar to somebody else. And to be honest, it was not a lovely conversation for the screening team. I handled some of it too.
Hmm.
But you understand because people, they feel like they've been wronged and they're correct in a way, and they
Right.
have a legitimate gripe because they're denied housing. So
Hmm.
it's
Yeah, I
it can get
mean
pretty
the
fired up in those situations.
the main difference here is, say that landlord had used a different screening service that just does an instant poll and gives you whatever the instant data says.
Hmm.
Almost assuredly, if rent prep had information that was incorrect, any instant database is going to have that same incorrect information and they're going to report it.
Yep.
The difference is with rent prep, when you call, someone will actually answer the phone and then you can work through the situation.
Yeah.
On most of those instant places, good luck trying to find a customer service number or something like that to try to say, hey, this is wrong, or whatever the case may be. There's a big difference between companies out there that actually have employees that pull these reports and touch them versus these guys that just push the incident reports out. And everybody thinks that those incident reports, they might be a couple dollars cheaper or something. I don't know, but the depth of information on those incident reports is just not the same as the reports you get from a company like RentPrep.
Yeah, in this particular case, it was the Smart Move report, which we offer, which is an instant report because
Yeah.
a lot of people want that credit score. And yeah,
Hmm.
I can't say for sure because we didn't run it on our own reports, but there's a good chance that we would have noticed that the name didn't match an address or didn't match some sort of identifier that the person had. So
Right. Right.
not to tout our own products too much, but that is why using that non-instant service can catch these errors before it ever gets to that point. So
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I don't know what the pricing difference is, but whatever it is, it's well worth it just for the peace of mind, in my opinion.
yeah, thank you. Uh, hey Mia, little wave emoji. Just want to say hello if you're still watching. All right, let's move to the next question. We got one from Tamara. She's in New Jersey, which I love that she put her state in first. I feel like that's very helpful if people are
It
posting.
is super helpful. Yeah.
So she had a natural gas leak. It was shut off around 10 p.m. last night. We have a plumber coming to replace pipes this evening, less than 24 hours later, and the gas
Hmm.
went back on. But the tenants are saying they can't cook and don't have money to buy food, but they do have a microwave. How do you handle these type of complaints from a tenant? Like there's kind of that weird gray area.
I mean, realistically speaking, you're talking about a 1 day disturbance. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, Sounds like the issue was reported and the gas was shut off. The issue's being resolved within 24 hours. It's Do you give them a credit? Do you not give them a credit? If they're really complaining that hard, I might consider like a 1 day credit or something like that. Or I'd read through the comments on it, and somebody else said just order them a pizza. If it's that big of a deal, if they're stretched that thin, which you would hope that attendants never stretch that thin, especially given the fact that we are, what's today, the 28th,
29th.
28th, 29th. We're on the 29th, which means rent is due in a couple of days. You would hope that they're not stretched so thin that September's rent payment is going to be late. But
Yeah.
realistically speaking, if you want to do something for that tenant, maybe a 1 day rent credit, or maybe send them a pizza or something like that, so that they have some food in the house or whatever. It Not having gas, not being able to cook for 1 day is not a major inconvenience, I don't think, unless they're on like some sort of ultra restrictive diet or something like that. I would probably just offer the 1 day rent credit, or offer to have a pizza delivered to them or something like that, just for the inconvenience factor, and I would leave it at that. I did read through the comments on this a little bit. The poster had actually said that the issue is more of an the tenants have like an entitlement issue, I guess, is more the problem. That being what it is, it is an inconvenience to the tenant. I mean, and
Yeah.
they're not wrong that they're not able to cook. So if you
Well,
feel as though you should offer something, if you put me in that position as a professional property manager, I would probably just throw them a 1 day rent credit and say, hey, sorry for the inconvenience, and move
yeah.
on with life.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where like I feel like some people they gripe whenever they have a chance to gripe. And in this
Exactly.
case, you know what? You can make the case for the fact that it's a legitimate gripe. Is it something that most people would gripe about? No. Like most people would be like, "Oh, I get
Right.
it. There's a gas leak. Thank you for taking care of it so quickly. We'll
Yeah.
eat out. We'll microwave something, whatever."
Right.
And I think that's where like the pride starts to come into it a little bit, where you're like, "No, I'm tired of getting pushed around by this, person who's constantly complaining." But it's like, what's more effort to just, like you said, give them that 1 day and just move on, or sit there and fight this person back and forth.
Right.
Probably something to, store away in the back of your mind when it comes time to renew the lease or not. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and as we're sitting here talking about this, I kind of thought about, we had a fridge that went bad. Um, and we were dealing with a home warranty company, and it was going to take them forever to get out there.
mhm.
And of course, fridges only go bad right after somebody goes out and buys all their groceries for the week. So they've got a full fridge and freezer full of food that's now not being kept cold. What happens if the food spoils and they demand a rent credit for several $100s for all the food that they lost? At that point, you're dealing with a little bit different set of circumstances for sure. I'm out of focus. you're dealing with a little bit of a different set of circumstances for sure. But that's also one of those things that if you're including appliances, you have to be prepared for those unintended types of situations. So it's just
Mhm.
something to think about, something to put in the back of your head for when the fridge goes next time. So
Yep. All right, we got a question that came in from Tiffany, and she asked about a tenant who asked her to have the dishwasher fixed. And after the
mhm.
repair was completed, the technician let Tiffany know that he found broken glass in the dishwasher that was responsible for it breaking. She said it's not a big deal, it's an accident, but how do you break it to your tenant that the reason for the repair is a result of their actions? And this went on a little bit longer, but she basically said, do I charge the tenant for it? Do I let them slide on this first one and tell them I'm charging them next time? Like, how do you handle these types of situations?
So I guess it goes back to the lease first and foremost. If your lease has a clause in it that allows you to bill a tenant back for damages caused by them, I would bill it back to the tenant. I wouldn't even give them I probably wouldn't even give them the one time on this, because it's chances are if it was a dishwasher repair, it was probably pretty substantial, a couple $100 at least, depending on what it was that broke. If it's something as simple as a glass broke and got caught somewhere in the assembly and the rotator arm couldn't move or whatever the case may be, I mean, it's definitely a tenant caused situation by the sounds of things.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't give them the one time on it. I would probably say, hey, this is a direct result of you not necessarily misusing the appliance, but whatever you did cause the appliance to break, this has to come back to you guys. It's not our responsibility. If you don't have that clause in your lease, well, now you have one more clause to put in your lease for the next renewal period on that lease.
Hmm. I think one of the things that kind of comes up in the group, and we've talked about this before, but is some people feel a little nervous to have uncomfortable conversations with people because, like, this
Right,
is one of them. If you tell them, "Hey, I'm billing you for this," that's not going to be a comfortable situation. Um,
right.
so one of the things I like doing these videos with you is that from repetitive experience of you doing things, I don't think it's as
Hmm.
uncomfortable, but I also think that you have the type of personality where you can go into a difficult situation and say difficult things that are harder for other people. So for me to go into that, I may be like, and then like I kind of just start like beating around the bush a little bit with somebody. Where an
Right.
experienced property manager is like, hey, look at your lease. This is what the lease says. Sorry, but this is what it is.
It is what
Um,
it is. Yeah. I mean,
so
and you have to have those conversations sometimes. It's not easy to have that conversation, especially if it's a tenant that you know is kind of like really just making ends meet, just squeaking by or whatever the case may be. It's a difficult conversation to have. You might be in a position where if, maybe you're in a little bit better financial position as a landlord, you can split it out over a couple months so it doesn't hit them all at once or something like that. Like you have some leeway there. There's nothing that says that you have to collect that entire sum all at once. They might be able to do something to work out a payment plan on it or whatever. But you shouldn't have to take a loss for something that the tenant legitimately broke.
yep. All right, let's move to our fourth and final question that comes from Ram. And he asks, he's doing the final walkthrough, and the tenant made two small holes in the walls and stained the carpet a little. How do you decide
Mhm.
how much to deduct from the security deposit?
Well, in New York, well, at least in our operation, what we would do is just deduct the cost of the repair. So if there's small holes, we usually go through and patch and paint as a course of action between tenants anyway. So if it's a couple of small holes, maybe from hanging a painting or something on the wall, I probably wouldn't bill them for that. To be honest with you, it's pretty minor. It's work that we're going to have to do anyway. I mean, if we're talking a bunch of holes, or like if a TV was mounted and you've got like bigger holes or something like that that require patching, that might be a little bit different set of circumstances. Um, as far as the stain on the carpet goes, when we have carpeted apartments, we actually have all of our carpets cleaned by a truck mounted steam cleaner before a tenant moves in. And
Hmm.
we document the condition of the carpets. We make sure that we get photos of them and everything else, including any stains that are already there on the carpet. So that way a tenant doesn't get charged for a stain that was there when they moved in. So it sounds like this is a fresh stain that was left by this tenant. If they haven't had the carpets cleaned, and we actually, our lease specifies it has to be a truck mounted steam cleaner. It can't be something like a rug doctor or a Bissell or something like that, because they leave so much residual residue in the carpet
Hmm.
that oftentimes they look worse than when you started a couple weeks after, because they just pick up so much grime and stuff. So that's why we mandate that it has to be the truck mounted steam cleaner. Or when a tenant moves out, we want them to leave us a copy of the receipt showing that that work was done by a licensed, or I'm sorry, by a professional carpet cleaning company. If
Okay.
they don't do that, then we go back and clean the carpets and deduct the entire carpet cleaning from their security deposit. In this instance, if they had the carpets cleaned and the stain didn't come out, I would charge them for the damaged portion of the carpet.
Okay. I think that's about as thorough of an answer as we could get on a stained
Mm-hmm.
carpet question. That's what I love about you, Andrew. You're a thorough person.
Lots of angles. I try to be.
Well, I think too that that helps quite a bit when you're, creating that lease. That's really where the thoroughness can come in handy because it's like that's going to be your thing you always point back to.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, our current lease is like 13 or 14 pages, I think.
yeah.
And I thought it was pretty in depth, but I saw somebody else's lease the other day that was even more in depth than ours was, and I was literally shocked. Like there
Is
was
that
some
like a
stuff in their
weird?
lease that I would never
Is that
I
like a
would
weird
never put in
property
ours.
manager thing? Like you guys like get together and show like, "Ooh, mine's 17 pages."
Well, the one I was looking at it was fewer pages than mine, but ours is just straight across paragraph format. Theirs was actually two columns, and it was like micro print. Man, it was so bad. Like I practically needed a magnifying glass just to read the thing. It was some national organization, like maybe National Apartment Association or something like that, was the one who put it out.
Mhm.
It was the most landlord friendly lease I'd ever seen. And I've looked at probably 100 leases at this point in my career, probably more than. It was the most landlord friendly lease I'd ever seen. Tenants basically, if you needed to sneeze, you practically had to ask the tenant for or the landlord for permission. It was that explicit. It was a really detailed lease.
I got a couple questions I'm going to answer here, but we'll do this one first. Carol asked, "Would you be willing to share your lease?" So it's probably state specific, and it's
Well,
probably
it's semi-state specific, but it's also specific to our region. Shoot me a message, Carol. I'll see if I can hook you up.
okay. And then Peg here had a question. She said that they have been having lots of wet weather here. Small areas of drywall in the basement of occupied rental has developed mold. Do I need to clean or do they?
Um, so the water's penetrating from the outside of the property by the sounds of things.
That's from the sounds of it. Yeah.
Sounds to me like they've got some seepage coming into the basement somehow, either through maybe a crack or something like that. Yes, they need to take care of that as the landlord, I would think.
Yeah.
Furthermore, I would say you might want to consider opening that drywall up to find out why you're getting moisture behind it. Just because a moisture issue is not something you want to leave any longer than you absolutely have to. So if you do have some kind of an underlying cause, and it could be something as stupid as the gutters are clogged and it just happens to be overflowing and hitting the ground right next to the house there and getting in, coming down the foundation wall or something like that. It could be something as simple as you need to repitch the ground away from the house so that the water's not all coming in towards the basement. It could be something more complex. It could be a crack. It could be a clogged drain tile. Could be a lot of things, but it definitely warrants investigation. And I would say in just about every circumstance, that would be a landlord responsible item.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I thought the same thing. If there's mold in there and it sounds like it's just from coming from the apartment, not something that the tenant has done. I mean, yeah,
Right.
if they smashed 1,000 gallon water tank or fish tank and
Yeah.
it's, created this issue, sure, they're going to pay for it, but you got to get that taken care of. You don't want to let mold linger. So,
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
all right, cool. That concludes episode 54 of Ask a Property Manager. Andrew, thank you for picking these questions out of the group. Thank you for the people who asked questions during the podcast and in the Facebook group Rent Prep for Landlords. We always appreciate the comments and questions. And yeah, until next week, I will see you in whatever 7 times 24 hours is. I was going to try to be specific with that, and I was like, wait, I don't know that one.
Yeah,
So
yeah. You can't just bust that math out real quick.
no, 140 plus. Oh gosh, I'm too tired for that.
Carry the three,
20,
subtract the
168
seven.
hours? Is it 168
That
hours in
that
a week?
sounds roughly right. I'm not doing math in my car.
Yeah. All right. Well, someone will correct me, I'm sure. All right.
No doubt.
All right. Have a good week.
You as well.